Welcome to Here's the Deal, where we educate, elevate, and inspire entrepreneurs. On Here's the Deal podcast, we bring 30 years of business banking experience to you, and we tell the real stories of business owners, the challenges, the lessons, and the wins that define their journey. Through Here's the Deal video marketing, we help you share your story with the world, creating high-quality video content that's easy, comfortable, and connected, because the story sells, not the numbers. Here's the Deal Production is a coaching, consulting, and production division designed to help entrepreneurs, business owners, and industry experts launch, grow, and professionally manage your podcast platforms without the technical barriers that often prevent the execution. You bring us a story, we'll refine the vision. Every entrepreneur has a story worth telling, and then Here's the Deal, that's where that story comes to life. That's right. Game 3 tonight, baby, in the Garden. You understand? It's going to be a lot different. We beat them twice in the Garden. We're going to make a show out of it. All right, here we go. All right, well, again, this is not a sports show. I could turn it into one if I want to, but not going to. Not today. But we are going to talk business, of course. But what we're talking about today is how much should small businesses spend on marketing? Very legitimate question for any small business owner out there, because it can be a confusing topic. Now, generally, the SBA says you should be spending somewhere around 7 to 10% on your marketing budget, but it's not what you spend, it's where you spend it. That's going to be the key. Okay. So when the SBAs recommend somewhere 7 to 10% that's for businesses under $5 million. Okay. I think there's a lot of variables to this, but one of the critical variables is going to be your margins. Okay. Your margins are going to really dictate a lot of things, because if you're operating a very skinny margin, like let's say you're trying to be that volume, low dollar volume person, 7 to 10% of your budget could break you. Okay. So that doesn't make any sense. If you're 15 plus percent margin, okay, then it can make a little bit more sense as far as that goes, because depending on of course what that revenue is. But again, it's gonna matter. It's gonna your individual business is really what's going to dictate a lot of it, because when Gartner's average for 2025, they polled some CMOs. They said somewhere around 7, like Duke University did something that was like 9.4. Okay, like that's where they came up with that whole 7 to 10 thing, as far as range goes, as far as that. But you got to remember too, these guys are interviewing like Fortune 500 companies. Okay, again, a little bit different than if you're running a garage somewhere or something like that. But the margins is always what's going to be the bigger key here. You know what I mean? For a bigger company, at a 7 to 10%, the lower percentage of your revenue. For a smaller company, it's going to be a much larger percent. So, like I said, again, you have to tweak it and individualize it for your particular business. It's just like anything else goes. But one of the critical mistakes that most business owners make is that when there is a downturn in the market, they want to quit marketing altogether. Like that's the first thing they start looking at cutting, when in all actuality that should be the thing you're doubling down on, because when your sales are down, you have to do something to let people know, hey, I'm here, I got stuff to sell, you're going to want to buy it. And how are you going to do that? You're going to do that through marketing. Okay, that's the one thing you don't want to cut. Then you want to double down. Okay. And I'm not just saying this because I run a marketing company, things like that. I mean, I'm saying this because these are facts, because marketing is going to bring in revenue. Okay, potential revenue. Certain expenditures might just be a drain on assets, depending on what that expenditure is. Okay, so you may want to go back if things are starting to take a downturn a little bit. Where else can we cut some costs? Maybe can we trim the fat? Maybe we're running a little bit rich on certain other things. As I said, ego's getting away and things like that. Like, oh, I'm not going to take a lesser percentage cut or something. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. But like I said, if the business isn't coming in the door, marketing is the way to get the business in the door. You know what I mean? So I think what most owners get wrong is that the benchmarks for these things, like I said, they're dealing with Fortune 500 companies. They're going with, like I said, those flat percentage rates, and I mean that can be, like I said, if you're a sustained larger business, yeah, you can maybe flatten that out. But I think the cleanest way to go through it, it's like, if you're, that if you're kind of like, smaller business, if you're somewhere in between, 5 and 7% your gross revenue, if you get into growth mode, it's more like 7 to 12 ish, somewhere in that range. But if you want to be like really aggressive, you want to like definitely buy some market share, things like that, you're probably going to go 15 to 20 percent. Okay. But again, depending on your business, depending on what you're comfortable with, and depending on what your margins are. Okay. So if you're, like I said, if you're super skinny, those type of numbers could kill you. But if you're running a business properly and you have proper margins, somewhere 20, 30%, you can absorb some of that cost to gain more. So I mean, one thing I was reading, it was like 66% of small business owners allocate less than $1,000 a year for marketing. I mean, you're not overspending, you're choking the life out of your business. I say because one advertisement could bring in that one client. That one client can bring in two clients. And like I said, it could just it can multiply. Okay, but if you're spending money on, I mean, like I said, flyer. I mean, well, I guess flyer is technically marketing, but there's other expenditures in your company. I'm sure you can lean back a little bit and take that money and invest it into the marketing side. And I think that's the other thing too, where business owners start getting, start puckering up a little bit, because they're looking at marketing as an expense. They're not looking at it as an investment. Like I was just saying. So you got to think, like I said, if you are allocating capital, and the question is, like I said, you got to always be thinking, like, what's my return going to be on this, things like that. One of the things I don't think business owners really have a grip on, even if they have their cost of goods and even if they have their margins, pretty dialed in, a lot of times people don't understand there's a ratio. It's called LTV to CAC. Now, from a banker world, LTV normally means loan to value. Okay, but we're not talking about that. What we're talking is the customer's lifetime value. So let's just say, for instance, customer pays you $1,000 a month, right? They do that for a year. You're looking at $12,000 for that lifetime of that customer, okay? Now, the cost of acquiring that client, that's the CAC portion, okay? So if you spend $1,000 to get that client at bringing in $12,000, so in essence you're netting at like 11. Makes sense, right? you're gonna spend that $1,000 to get that $12,000 in revenue. So what you want to always do from a marketing perspective is that you want to weigh the lifetime value of the customer as opposed to the cost to acquiring that customer, and that's where you're going to really know how much bang for the buck you're really getting for your dollar. Okay. The rule is if your LTV to CAC is above 3-to-1, you definitely have some room to even maybe spend a little bit more. Okay. If it's below that, again, that's something you want to start maybe cutting into some other types of expenditures to make up the margin in there, because you don't want to cut back on the marketing side when dollars get tight. But what we think of, even like from a banking perspective, it's not so much what things cost, it's what's my return going to be and how fast can I get it back. Okay, so like I said, if you're spending that $1,000, how quickly can I flip that $1,000 into getting that client that's going to, net me 11 grand over the next year. Okay. And these are the things that you have to weigh in on. So, like I said, if you're living by that rule, that the LTV to the CAC, if you put that into your planning, you're going to really get a grasp on what your returns are. But unfortunately, I said a lot of business owners treat this as an expense, like it's some kind of a line item on a P&L, rather than looking at it as an investment. Because if you're running a company, you're going to spend money on inventory, right? I mean, you have to have product to sell, things like that. But if you look at your marketing budget as inventory, because it can return money to you, just like your inventory does. You sell a product, you make money on that product. Well, your marketing could bring you in clients that you never would have acquired if they weren't somewhere like right around your area. Okay. So these are the different mentalities I think business owners really have to dip into. Okay. We know we don't have a lot of money. We can't just throw money at a problem like these other larger, Fortune 500 companies, things like that. They spend ungodly amounts of money. And I mean, I don't know who's calculating those returns, things like that. But for us regular, smaller business owners, things like that, if you have like $1,000 a month to spend, okay, you can't spend it across 5 different things. Okay. You can't spend it across, social media campaigns and Google ads and all that kind of stuff. And don't even get me started on Google and Meta ads, because I think it's a huge waste of money. But we're going to cover that a little bit later. Now, if you got $1,000 a month that you can spend, and I'm not saying this because I run a video marketing company. I'm saying this because this is where you're going to get the actual bang for the buck kind of thing. A good social media video campaign can go a very long way. Of course, do it. Here's the deal. You're probably that dollar's probably going to stretch a lot farther than you think. But it's, probably the lower cost entry point than some of the other alternatives, right? Because people get to see you. The video builds trust, okay? And when they're hearing your story, when they're hearing your voice, they're hearing your inflection, they're hearing how passionate you are about what it is that you do, that's going to make them say, I want to talk to that person more, okay? Video is the only way you're going to do that. I love a good one-to-one meeting, face-to-face, shaking hands, all that kind of stuff. That's all great. Love it. Do it all the time. But, and I do my virtual Zoom meetings. So, of course, I'm dealing with people, all over the world. So I deal with a lot of Zoom stuff. But that's the thing. When you're having this one-to-one meeting with somebody, that video, I call it the force multiplier, because somebody somewhere can be seeing your video. You're having a one-to-one meeting in Phoenix, LA, whatever. Somebody's seeing it in Australia. Like, hey, I want to talk to these people. You know what I mean? So, and videos, it's something you can spread across multiple platforms. You can put on your website, you put on your Google business page, you put on all your social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, the whole thing. So, like I said, you're going to get more bang for the buck. And again, if you here's the deal to do it. So one client will probably get you the ROI back, because like I say, because I think we're a very cost-effective company to do this kind of thing with. So if you know what your real floor is, you got to know how much you're going to have to generate in volume and see those patterns, so that way you can really generate. Okay, here's what we can spend, And again, being aware of the margins and what you're spending on, what your cost to acquire those companies are, is going to be very, very important. Another really good high ROI return, if you will, email marketing. Email marketing is great because you already know these people, right? They already know you. So if you're sending out an email campaign, hey, we're having a sale on this, or hey, we're launching a new product, things like that. They're already either customers of yours or contacts of yours. They're not going anywhere. Okay. Another one, would be SEO, spending the money on your website, spending money on your landing page, spending money on your social media posts, which is another thing Here's the Deal does. Shameless plugs all over. Those things count, okay? And it's much more cost effective than some of the other routes that you can go as far as, spending your marketing dollars. The top 3 ROI for content, in 2026, it's all video. It's short form video, long form video, and doing live video. Now, I have done a couple live videos. I need to do a lot more. Again, I got to hit the effing button. That goes to me too. I got to start doing a lot more live videos. But these are, like I said, again, it's a force multiplier, man. Video gets your face and your name and your company brand out there. Because the video is going to build assets, okay, that people, they're going to do business with you. So it's more of a building an asset, and you're building something that's going to, like I said, generate and fuel business for you, as opposed to spending on something that, again, spending money at Starbucks or something. It's just not going to bring you the returns that spending some money on some marketing will do. You know what I mean? Again, it's not, you're not asking the question so much of how much should I spend, but the better question is, where should I spend that? So you're going to get hit with all. Again, I'm going to probably rail on Google and Meta ads for a little bit, but you gotta really pick and choose where you're going to fight those battles. So again, I'm probably looking at more like doing video stuff, doing email marketing, over pay-per-click all day long, because, email and video, they don't ship with algorithms. Okay. Video does, but that's what I said. That's why you got to kind of keep up on, the SEO stuff and things like that. But email's not going to shift with an algorithm. So if you're going to spend some money, email marketing campaign might be your better bang. So don't be afraid of that. But I think people get sucked into this psychology, because you really want this instant gratification. Like, oh, if I spend this money, I better get a return like tomorrow. And it's like, and I wish that were the case, but usually if you're not spending at least 90 to 180 days building up something, people got to have time to get out there. You got to get that exposure. You got to see it. It's not going to be tomorrow. Okay. No matter, I don't care how much money you spend and how great your product is. Like I say, getting that return on that investment, it's not going to be tomorrow. Okay. So again, people get into this psychological thing where it's all like, it's like the microwave mentality that everybody has, So again, when you're talking about pay-per-click and you're talking about email, things like that, let's go back to that lifetime value of the customer and the cost of the acquisition. Okay. Always be thinking, if you want to think about anything, think about that. Okay. If your activity leads to generation of revenue that exceeds the cost, you win. I mean, that's just all there is to it. You're not burning cash. Okay. Meta and Google ads. There is a difference between the two. Okay. And you really want to know what it is you're spending money on. Personally, I am not a fan of either one of these, and I wouldn't recommend it to any of my clients until much further down the road when you're generating a ton of revenue. But again, I'm just not a big fan of it. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm probably going to get all kinds of hate on that, but oh well, don't care. These platforms are built for you. They're rewarding your spending money. Again, they're the ones receiving. It's not rewarding you, it's rewarding them. Okay, when you're buying these Google Meta ads, they're winning. Not you. You may get zero out of it, but they're going to win. Okay, and that's not what we're about. All right. Google Meta ads are tools in the business, kind of like AI, like the video, like email. But if you're not using the correct tool for the correct job, what's it doing? But you're going to get, oh yeah, Google Meta ads, Google Meta. It's like that for your business, it may not be right, and it probably won't be. I know there's a survey, like according to PPC chief web converts, like Google equals high intent. Okay, someone is actively seeking a plumber or a lawyer or somebody like that. Okay, and they got their wallet out, they're ready to pay for something. So if you're going to spend money between Google and Meta, I'm going Google first, just saying, or YouTube, which is on my Google. I'd probably go that route as opposed to, because when you're doing Meta ads, again, you might catch somebody scrolling and you might not. You know what I mean? The research was saying, the average is like $2 or $4.22 versus a Meta ad, which is like gonna be $1.72. So Meta ads like, ooh, it's cheaper, so it's a lot more lower cost of entry. But when you get a click-through rate of 6% as opposed to 1.5 or whatever the research, it's like I'll take a closer to 7% return rather than 1.5. Okay, because but you're going to spend a little bit more money to do it, but you're going to get a better rate of return. Meta ads interrupt people. Again, you might be scrolling through, Facebook or something like that, and you'll catch this ad or something like that, and okay, you weren't even like looking for that. Not like Google where you're putting it in. I need, this, that, and the third in my area or whatever, right? Is it cheaper? Yes. Is it cheaper getting the Meta ads than is Google ads? It is. And again, that might suck some people in, but when your conversion ratios are a lot lower, a lot less return on ROI, going back to that lifetime value of customer, cost of acquisition, it all plays in, right? So don't let the cheaper Meta ads pull you in, because you're just going to keep dumping money down that hole. Okay, so if you're gonna go anywhere between, you might as well just go play the slots at this point. You know what I mean? If you were gonna buy anyone between the two, I would probably take the Google ads over the Meta ads. I wouldn't buy either one of them, but as far as that goes, because at least when somebody's in Google, they're saying, I'm looking for X. I think it's a much more effective, in my personal opinion. The whole pay-per-click thing, these are some of the numbers that people should be really paying attention to, is that not all clicks lead to leads, okay? So, they got the cost per lead is what actually matters. Again, going back to that CAC, how much do you spend as opposed to how much did you make? Is it worth the lead generation? Your lead conversion is going to be your key. Okay, if you're spending money and you're converting clients, okay, that's great. If it's working for you, but again, usually on average, the click-through rates are usually a little bit lower, but you'll get more according to these studies, according to the pay-per-click reviews, things like that. The Google ads are definitely going to get you more return than the Meta, but you're going to pay more for it. Okay, the Meta ad's cheaper, but you got to keep pumping money into it. The marketers are going to give you all the buzzwords. They're going to talk about ROAS and all this other shit. Don't let them blind you with their bullshit. Okay. We're judging against the margins. We're not judging against industry averages. Okay. This whole, you're going to say, the whole ROAS thing, they're talking to, like I said, they're talking to Fortune 500 companies. They're not talking to you. So this is the thing that we got to, again, pay attention to. Don't fall for the bullshit, because there's a lot of salespeople out there, and this is how they get paid. And they're not looking out, for your best interest. So if you, like I said, the rule is you got a 20% margin, you're getting 3-to-1 ratio, you're cooking and smoking, right? If you're at a 10% margin, you're just working to pay for the leads. So again, the margin thing always comes into play. When you're doing pay-per-click, you're kind of renting some attention to yourself. You know what I mean? Because once you stop spending, that goes dark. That goes away, gone right now. Okay, so what are you when you spend money on video, or if you spend money on your SEO? Okay, that's an asset you're going to keep. The video you're going to retain. The SEO is going to be on your website, and it's going to be getting Google crawling it and things like that. Again, those are investments. Okay, pay per click, you're renting. I'm not a fan. Okay, I've said my piece on that. Because if you don't have that constant spend on pay per click, everything's just going to stop. So if you want to get, it will get you in front of customers quickly. Okay, that is one thing that it will do. Where video and SEO is going to maybe take a little bit more time, but again, you own that asset. You don't own your pay per clicks, right? So, just kind of in closing, don't spend money on ads before you actually have like a real funnel existing of revenue, kind of coming in, things like that. If you're going to spend money on those Google and Meta ads, the cost is going to be quite a bit. It's going to be, so you want to make sure you're hitting those metrics. So, if you have a really weak landing page and you don't really have your systems in place, you're kind of just, pouring water in a bucket with a hole, right? Make sure that you're don't get me started on boost. Don't get me started on boosting posts. Don't even get me on that one. But if you're going to spend some money, spend the money on your SEO. Okay. Spend the money on your video, things like that. And don't compare yourself to these national averages. And your margins. Okay. Like I said, marketers are going to baffle you with a bunch of crap, but they're not pertaining to your business. They're talking to companies in like New York and LA and, but they're trying to sell you on that, on what they do with these guys. That's not your business. Okay. So pay attention to your margins, pay attention to remember we were talking about, the lifetime value. All right. And then we're talking about the CAC, the LTV CAC. Those are things about how much did it cost to get you to acquire that client and what was the value of that client over your lifetime. That and the margins you'll know you're getting your bang for your buck. And let's go Knicks. Go New York, go New York, go. Go New York, go New York, go. Go New York, go New York, go. Go New York, go. I can't hear you. Go New York, go New York, go. Say what? Go New York, go New York, go. Hustling hard, we show no fear. No shortcuts, always prepared. Here in closing up the show, and here's the deal. Just want to give all honor, glory, and praise to my Lord Jesus Christ, who, saved my soul and gives me the ability to do this show. Without him, I couldn't do anything. Also want to give thanks to my family. My wife, my kids support me doing this and, backing me up. I couldn't do any of this without them also. Got to thank the sponsors, of course. Everybody that, supports the show. And, of course, the fans. The people that subscribe to the show. I wouldn't do any of this without you because it wouldn't be a show. So just want to say thank you all very much. Continue to, educate and elevate, get out there, pursue your passions, pursue your dreams.